I think we'll get started. Thanks for coming. Good to have some people coming back. Good to have some new faces too. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
I've been really looking forward to this one. I have a long history with Matti and her family. Hired her mother as a work-study student when she came to BSU, and kind of followed the Pellins from that time, and the next generation shows up. Long story short, Matti spends 4 years in marketing and communications at BSU as a student, learned all the skills she had. She graduated on a Friday. We hired her full-time on a Monday, and that kind of started her BSU career, and she'll tell more of her story. But I was just sharing with Kevin, this is kind of the classical entrepreneur with a million ideas and dabbling in lots of things, very good at most all of them. And probably needs some little focus and ideas, and we don't want to lose sight of the long-term goal, which I'm promoting, which is a coffee shop, artisan maker space in Bemidji. So we had Matti and her husband Cole here for some time, and they've just recently relocated to Baudette, and in this kind of race for talent, we want to get these people back here if we can. But we're also promoting Northwest Minnesota much more than we have in the past, and collaborating with those people. So she's in that circle of trust anyways. But you might hear about things related to being an artist, being creative, being a photographer, a marketer, a social media guru. I've heard hydroponics. There's an excavator service after hours. There's bed and breakfast. There's
might need your business.
there's a lot of things, but I'll let Matti kind of tell her story, and then again, if you want to maybe in the back of your mind think about, well, how can we get good people to come back to an area that they have an affinity for, and again, bringing good people back to our community. So I will turn it over to Matti.
Thanks, Paul. Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Matti, formerly Pelland, now Nelson. My husband and I just got married in February. I don't have a super formal presentation for you. I'm a visionary person, so I thought I'd give you some good fun photos. But I define myself as a multi-passionate creative and a brew connoisseur. So when you think brews, think beer, wine, coffee, tea, all the brews. A little bit of who I am. I grew up in Lake of the Woods, or Baudette, Minnesota. We lived here for a little short time when I was younger, but I have always called Baudette home. I graduated in 2014, moved up, down here to Bemidji for college. I attended BSU as a business marketing student, and later went on to work in the Office of Admissions, as Paul had mentioned, and now I manage my mother-in-law's coffee shop up in Baudette, Minnesota, called the New Moon Coffee House. Some photos here for reference. That's my husband and our dog Burke. Up in the top right are my parents and my sister Megan. Down here are my in-laws, so Terry and Janice, my husband Cole, sister-in-law Katie and Cody, and then just a little fun picture of me and my freshman roommate Bethany from homecoming, because it's homecoming week. It's exciting. So my journey to BSU was, I did not want to come here. I toured BSU against my will. My mom tricked me into a trip to Bemidji, and we showed up at campus, and I was like, really, Mom? I told you I didn't want to go here. I felt like it was forced upon me. It was a decision already made. Both my parents, those fly-looking kids up there in the late 80s, early 90s, they both had gone to BSU, so they were really rooting for Bemidji State. Had obviously some connections there, Paul being one of them. And it wasn't until the fall of my senior year of high school that I realized maybe I did want to go to BSU. I just wanted to find out why for me. And it was hunting season, and all my family was around, of course, an unglorified holiday in northern Minnesota, and I thought, gosh, I can't be that far away from my family. So I decided I wanted to go to BSU. And I was like so gung-ho about it, finally confident in my decision, feeling again like it wasn't forced upon me. But I had no idea what I wanted to go to school for. At the time, I was working at the local coffee shop in Bemidji, at that time known as the Smiling Moon. When I turned 14, my dad marched me around town and said, "You have to find a job." And that was the one place I got a job. So my dad said, "You know, Maddie, you look at all these things that you're involved with." At the time, growing up in a class of 35 kids, you were the class president and student council and volleyball and hockey and all the things. You're involved in all of it because there's only so much to go around. I thought of those things as I'm kind of forced into doing them because no one else is doing them. My dad said, "No, you have strong leadership skills. How about you go to college for business, and what if you owned your own coffee shop one day?" I was like, "Oh, okay." I had never thought of that before. I never had a calling of, I want to be a nurse or a firefighter or any of those things. I was very lost. I knew I wanted to go to college, but I had no idea what for. So my dad kind of redirected that and said, "Go to college, do business." So that's what I did. I came to school. I was here for 4 years, graduated with exactly 120 degree credits for my degree. I worked at Canterbury Coffee, just down the street, and while I was in school, I worked in the Office of Communications and Marketing with Andy Bartlett. I had the opportunity to learn web design, web management, writing stories, social media, photography, all the things. I super loved it, was able to start building relationships with influential people on campus, and knew that I did not want to leave. My goal was to get a job before I graduated, and it happened, which was super exciting. But Bemidji had flourished and grown so much in the time that I was a student in college that I felt so incredibly tied to the community that was here, and I wanted to stay here and be a part of it. Come to 2018, that's when I graduated. So started working in admissions and got involved with the Bemidji Rotary. I've been a volunteer of the Rotary Youth Leadership Award Camp, which is a youth camp that goes on every summer. Within that time, I started honing in on my love for brews, so I created MN Brew Babe. So now it's my initials, so that's kind of fun. But initially for Minnesota Brew Babe, with a play off of Paul and Babe. Throughout COVID, I was at my computer. Both my husband and I were working from home, and felt like all of my time was spent on a screen. So I naturally was doodling all the time during my meetings and whatnot, and thought, you know, I see all these different things on Instagram, and at the time I was planning a wedding, so I had all these lettering things going on, so I started lettering on the side, doing stuff for businesses, as well as weddings, events, whatnot, with my handwriting. I started crafting earrings. I learned something in a workshop on how to craft earrings out of polymer clay.
Seen them at Contemporary?
Yes, yep. My husband and I fully remodeled our home, so we completely gutted it and renovated that on our own. We started another one up north from an investment from some family members, so we have that going on. I've started cooking. I really love cooking. So there's just this plethora of things that have really sparked up over the last 3 years, but in the end, my goal has always been to own a coffee shop. And at the beginning, it was more so that love and passion for coffee, but on the inside, it's really been providing an environment. So that is what my grand idea is for today. I got a little bit ahead of myself. What I was going to say in this slide was my husband and I got married in February, like I said, in 2021, just this 7 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we were on our honeymoon. We left our house a complete mess as it was being renovated, hoping that the sheetrock guy was actually going to finish and we were going to come home with sheetrocked walls. And we kind of said, like I said, we were both working from home, and we were like, what are we doing? What's our goal here? What are we working towards? If our jobs aren't keeping us in Bemidji anymore, what is our purpose here? With us both working from home, we were going up to Vedette quite often. Both of our families still live there. And we started renovating a house up there for a rental. And we said, well, if we can work from wherever we want to be, what if we move to Vedette? The market's up. We're renovating our home right now. We could probably make some good money. So we stayed at this tiny little cabin, as you see on the right here, north of Flagstaff. It was this 1-bedroom little place in the absolute middle of nowhere. It was amazing. It was great. And we took out a spreadsheet and put down all of our debts, all of our profits, all of our investments, and said, what's the next move? And at that time we decided it would be the best for us to move to Vedette, where we already own a property, live there mortgage-free, debt-free, and leave with a chunk of money in our hands, with the intention of, let's go home for the next couple years and maybe we'll come back to Bemidji. That is of course still the idea. We're still flexible. It's been 4 months now that we've been in Vedette. I'm in Bemidji at least twice a month, if not more. But life up north is great. We love it. As you can see, we go fishing quite often. This was our house we renovated here in Bemidji. I miss those granite countertops so much. I don't even have countertops right now. I just got a toilet yesterday, so it was a big deal. But at the end of the day, I'm still looking to provide an environment. So now, in Vedette, working at the New Moon Coffee House, yes, we're a coffee house, but we're also one of 3 restaurants, you would say. We have we're a tourist destination, much like Bemidji, a lot of people coming up and visiting. As you've seen in the market, a lot of people are coming up and staying. They're moving here. They want to be here, they want to live this more simple life, they want to be outdoors. And there's the balance of making sure that your locals are taken care of, but also that balance of making sure those tourists that are coming to town or new residents are happy and their needs are being fulfilled as well. So I would love to create an environment that serves entrepreneurial spirit, creativity, and overall northern Minnesota. Of course, this line has been blurred between Bemidji and Vedette for me for a long time, but I'm seeing more and more so much on like this focus on northwestern Minnesota and making sure that people are given the opportunity that they deserve. Resources can get spread thin. Community can get really, really small, really quick. But also, and being in a smaller town now, so much negativity can be put on things too. Ordinances are put in the way, old ways are put in the way. I feel here in Bemidji, yes, of course, there are those types of things, but also on a bigger scale, so much more support. And since there are more resources here, more people, being able to spread that out and make this more community gathered place. I know in some of the workshops that we've done here, it has been people from War Oak, Roseau, Vedette, Thief River Falls, so be it. Vedette or Bemidji is a very destination spot for a lot of northern Minnesota. So when I think of this like in a perfect world place, I imagine something like this, but with a makerspace. So for myself, being into making earrings or lettering, it doesn't make sense for me to have an office per se. So like we have the co-working spaces that can be rented out. But what about for the people that are passing through town or need a place to do a photo shoot, let's say, someone that doesn't have enough money to, or again, doesn't make sense to have a studio full-time, but maybe they need it once a month, coming in and providing that type of service. And when I think of those different services, I also think of, again, creating an environment that makes people stay here, makes people want to come here, makes people feel like they're part of the community. So maybe there's a coffee shop in here that creates regulars, or people that want to have that conversation around a coffee mug. I imagine hosting workshops. You know, maybe you're a woods craftsman and you want to teach something as simple as making something on the lathe, maybe a lamp, for someone to bring home over the holidays for a loved one. Whatever it might be, I think of this as a sustainable, cyclical motion of finding those students at BSU or the tech college. And yes, I'm definitely one for education. I'm a product of education, my parents are. But there isn't always the time for that self-discovery and thinking of really what is next. I consider myself very, very lucky to have been surrounded myself with influential people that did give me those tools and the knowledge and the wisdom to think critically and have those goals set out and be working towards them. But what about the students that kind of get a little lost in the shuffle with those passions that can become very overwhelming and kind of give direction to what could be next? So with that, I want you to think of whether they're friends, family, coworkers, whatever it may be, and you think of their passions and what they love to do, or maybe even yourself, and what is stopping them from moving on to the next level. And maybe they don't want to move on to the next level, maybe they just truly enjoy that passion and they feel that it is a need. But what types of things come to mind that might stop them?
Leaving a big paycheck and benefits.
Leaving a big paycheck and benefits. That is very, very valid. Any others?
Some of it, especially when you're talking about more art related, the confidence to believe in yourself, because it is a risky, right? It's risky.
Absolutely.
So the confidence in, yes, they want to do the art, but I think oftentimes the business acumen that needs to go behind that in order for it to be sustainable and they get a paycheck and potentially are able to afford benefits, I think is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And they don't have, up here, right, we don't, I mean, unless you're a doctor or you're over at BSU, you don't have the money for a studio, right, and you've got art supplies strewn all over the house and whatnot. So I think that's part of it as well. But I think your next slide is going to get to, so how do we overcome those? Is that where we're going?
This is the conversation.
Okay.
Is how do we overcome those? I don't have the answer, unfortunately, I don't. In my head, I see it as a way to have those benefits, and almost that stability is each piece of this crafter's space or co-working space is feeding off one another. So just like most I'll use BSU for instance, there is an HR, there is a finances department, there is marketing, there is all these different things that keep the ship afloat. How can you create that sort of cyclical motion where everyone is they're all working towards the same goal, but it's more so focused on growing those skills and helping the people along the way in those passions.
Have you ever been to Art of World down in the cities?
I have not.
Okay, so the concept that you are proposing is very much like Art of World.
Okay.
So Art of World is the largest open studio tour in the country.
Wow.
So it is a ginormous building in, I think it's in North Minneapolis, where artisans, you name it, people who do rugs, jewelry, glass blowing, you name it. There's this ginormous building.
Is it the old Hams Brewery building?
No, that's in St. Paul.
Okay.
If it's the one I'm thinking about, the Hams Brewery is in St. Paul.
It could be, yeah.
The old one. And then they have this tour. It's advertised as Art of World. I don't know if you pay a fee to go in and it's like open studio time where you get to see the artists in their studios either working or this is what it looks like to be an artist kind of thing. They canceled it due to COVID, just like everything else was canceled. To your point, how do you make it sustainable, right? Like how do you, that I don't know, right? I've always been sort of someone like, oh, let's go do the Art of World tour, right? And then it's great because they have the little trolleys that take you around. You get to go see all of these some amazing art. So I envision, maybe not to that scale, but I envision something like that based on what you're proposing right now. It's just, I think we need to make a list of how do we do it here in this building? Do we have another location that makes sense? And then the financial backing initially to get it going.
Absolutely.
And then, when you're a customer to stuff like Art in the Park, right? Like I don't know how many hours go into getting enough product to have at Art in the Park. I don't know how much do they make enough on doing several of these to live, right? So those are some things that, and maybe maybe you've done some of that research. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, and when I think of like a mall, for instance, everyone used to want to go to the mall and go shopping and do their thing and whatever. Now we see malls are dying. Everyone's buying those types of products online, but we are seeing more of the same type of mall concept, but with crafts. So like Keg and Case. Maybe you're thinking of Keg and Case and the brewery down in St. Paul.
Maybe.
Where there's a brewery, but there's also hydroponic mushroom farming. There's soaps. There's you're all in one space, but there's different crafts. And when I say crafts, I don't always mean specifically art, of course, but beer or coffee or whatever it may be. So I think of it as, it's so scary as just, for instance, my lettering or my earring making. To be able to scale that, I know deep down I don't want it to scale, number one, because it's a hobby, it's a passion. But two, it's a saturated market. And lettering might not be in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but I enjoy doing it right now. But Bud, you're a great example of this with your brewery, starting to craft at home. You're experimenting or whatever, and you did get to that spot of opening up your first place, and being able to surround yourself with other people who are in the same boat, who are starting out, who need the resources, and everyone's kind of able to feed off one another in working towards that goal.
Maddie, I saw Lolo Peak Brewery pint glass, did you guys drive out to
Montana?
Missoula? Yeah.
We flew to Missoula.
Oh.
We went all the way to Spokane,
Yeah.
and then north, and then back.
I was curious because if you had gone through Livingston, in Livingston, did you go to the Cactus Blossom?
We didn't. Livingston was like basically shut down by the time we had gotten through because we went through the national park.
Well, it's a 14-hour drive. Go ahead and from Baudette.
Mm-hmm.
You could go check out the Cactus Blossom, and in there is earring maker. There's a storefront in Livingston, one block off of the main street.
Okay.
And they have, I think it's 4 or 5 artisans that are together, and they have their space in the back half of it is where their studio is and where they build, make, and I think they do invite folks to come back and see it at different occasions. And then the whole front half is an entire retail, and it's set up to be almost like when you go into the Yellow Umbrella or something like that. It's a full retail experience, but it's exclusively handmade products that you're seeing, featuring primarily those 4 or 5 artisans, and then they also draw from some of the other communities in the area and feature their products too, and they kind of have it merchandised in a way where it categorically makes sense. You feel like you're going through a retail experience that you this is the earring section. I mean, it's certainly heavy-handed towards the Casey, I think her name was the maker of the leather earrings there. And because obviously they're kind of fronting the space, they got that advantage. But at the same time, they are building up their inventory with all of the regional draws as well. And so when you go in there, it's really cool because it's like, all right. I mean, obviously, Livingston has the advantage of being, at the top of the canyon that goes to the Yellowstone. So I mean, like that's Paul and Babe's pretty good, but it's not quite Yellowstone National Park, but at the same time, this is the top of the Mississippi waters, and I mean, there's a variety of things that could contribute towards that. But what's interesting is it seems like a scale that might be relatable, that you can maybe ask them, because the cool thing about that is you're not directly competing with them, right? Because that's always some of the tough asks I know is like, how do you get into the coffee shop business? I mean, it's going to be hard to go ask Reed Olson because it's like direct competition. Although I'm sure he'd be open to discussing it, but that can be one of the tricks. But for there, it's like you're just never going to overlap, and I'd be curious if they could tip their hand towards what the financial realities look like to answer some of the questions you have, like how do you make it financially feasible, which seems to be one of your big questions. Does it cash flow? Rent there's way higher than here, so like that's an advantage. So if it can work there, like they have the disadvantage of rent. They have the advantage of being in Livingston, which is a little more cachet than Bemidji at this point in time. But it'd be interesting to see if that is if it has any alignment with what you're envisioning. It doesn't have a coffee shop component, which would be kind of cool.
That'd be kind of cool.
There's also a place in Milwaukee, and the name escapes me. I can get it from my cousin. But what's nice about that is in the summertime, it's a great place. It's kind of like an open air sort of experience. But then they have, to your point, and I hate the word mall, but it's mall-like, right? But it's very much designed like an artist's, from an artist's perspective versus, there's Maurice's and there's Kmart and there's Kohl's, right? It's a very, and I envision perhaps on one end the coffee shop, on the other end the brew, and you can coordinate with our fellow brewer here, and I can see like doing a pub crawl, right? Like start at Bemidji Brewing, come on down, check it out. And so I guess if I'm like just throwing out ideas, and then I think about like how Union Station is so underutilized. I just see that as rife for an opportunity like that, and people could easily walk from Bemidji Brewing down to go check out some of the artists and maybe get a coffee or whatever, right? The other thing too, and you make a good point when you talk about BSU and how they have a finance department and they have HR. A lot of artists don't want that part of the experience, right? So how do we help? Because I think of a lot of our local artists. I think of Cindy Berger and some of the other artists that are around. But how do we help them minimize that kind of stuff that they likely don't care for, right? But help them be sustainable and get some of their home studios, get away from some of their home studios, right? I was just out in Cass Lake over at Jamie's, I forget her last name, doing a little stained glass window project, right? So how do we bring her in? Maybe she has a studio, right? Maybe there's a guest studio where they can come into Bemidji, offer that in Bemidji, but then they still maintain their studios at home or whatever that looks like.
Absolutely.
So that would be fun.
Would it be possible to have, let's say, at Bemidji Brew, a little shadow box with product in it, and have maybe another place at the airport or things like that with, your little insignia name and so forth. And
Yeah.
but thank God for parents. I mean, they gave you a little boot to go to college, and when it comes to finance, maybe they would be able to help too, because it all takes money to get that investment off the ground and up and running. And then too, seems like when it becomes a job rather than a hobby, then sometimes interests break off.
Yes.
So there's a lot of avenues, a lot of directions to go with that.
Yeah.
Matti, I'm glad Bud's here because he's actually leading the charge and exploring the makerspace concept in Bemidji, and this may be another meetup downstream, but I don't know to what extent we've gone to explore all of these facets to it, because we like the education component, obviously.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you could do, and it does fit the culture of this community very well.
Yeah, it really
to kind of
does.
package this up
Very
in terms
much
of
so.
support for those people, give them a place.
And what a great way for them to just really excel.
Yeah. And I love your idea. I'm all for happy hour and woodworking.
Right?
Great combination. Yeah,
You
that
might
sign
want
me
to
up.
make
Yeah.
sure that the saws are being put away. Maybe things are pre-cut
Yeah, there you go.
before we
The
come
glue
down.
ups.
We could
Do
do
the
it.
glue ups.
Right.
So, Bud, do you have a brief update on Makerspace?
Well, it's in its infancy, actually. I guess would be the best way to put it. It doesn't have any platform to build from at this point. This is the perfect time to be part of that discussion. And I know I'm actually going to be meeting up with a couple of folks that Mary had mentioned before. We've been in contact with an email just this week, and it's entirely open. If you have, and this goes for anybody who has an appetite for that sort of thing, please let me know, because we need to kind of gather and get an idea of how if a makerspace should occur in Bemidji, which I think there's an inclination that it could, but we should be scrutinous on that to decide if that really does have a viable future, which could be the discussion of financial part of it, right? And then two, if that is going to be the case, then how should it manifest? Like, what ways should this makerspace serve the community? Where should it be? Like, what equipment, tools, and resources should be made available in that space? It's a big question, because a lot of that's calibrated to who the potential users are. Of course, woodworking is an easy analogous portion to begin from, but at the same time, there's sewing machines. There's
glass blowing.
Glass blowing.
There's
kilns are a big thing that is hard for pottery throwers to be able to you know,
carry
have
around,
on their
number
own.
one, right, and then, yeah,
sometimes
and then
it's-
afford two, one at the studio and one at home, or.
Well, and additionally too, like how do you do it on any quantity or any sizable pieces? Like for the home ones, they're a little too small, and if
Right.
you're going to do several, it's nice to know that there might be few people that want to throw their pieces in the kiln. I mean, and that's there seems to be a space where there could be a very much an overlap of not just artisan and craftsmanship, but also prototypers and folks that are looking to make products that might scale into a different variety of, or even like a whole new level of something that they can turn into an entire business on its own.
Yeah.
And so,
Right. And my Bemidji is a perfect example, right? Like, I love going in there. I'd love to buy everything in there, although the shorts don't quite fit. But like, I'm sure hey, can you make me some, my Bemidji mugs, right? And keep that local, right? Versus, well, I'm sure somebody in China can make that for us.
Right.
We are a global economy, so I'm not certainly putting that down, but
there's a space for all of it.
yeah, keeping that here, and then, I'm sure Compass Rose and whoever can sell, and 218, and I love the idea about the airport. I didn't even think, right, like, advertise, right, check out
Yeah.
so,
I wonder about making that space, flexible. I feel like having spaces for weddings, like people are really interested in finding unique places to host
Yep.
events, and you can make a lot of money on that. So if you were to have a space that's flexible enough that it could be booked for a Saturday night event, and you could, I don't know if it's like roll things out of the way,
Yeah.
or if I wanted to teach yoga classes there or something, like be able to open up that space to be used for other sorts of events, really.
Yeah.
that is actually
I
brilliant.
love that.
Thank you.
Well, and I think it's the balance of finding the staple environments like a brewery or a coffee shop or a yoga studio or a hair salon, for instance, even if it's just for bridal hair. It's not necessarily a full
Right.
functioning.
It's a one-stop shop. Come get
But-
your hair done, come get this done, and then you're ready. Boom,
Yeah.
you're right there.
But even for hairstyle, like I consider that a craft. For hairstylists to not have a studio to be able to do 8 bridesmaids' hair because their regular like salon that they keep in doesn't have the space for it. Or what I was gonna get at is having, let's just say out of a mall or a space of 10 spots, maybe 5 of those are crafted maker spaces and 5 of those are staple businesses that still kind of tie into that same type of population that appreciates a brewery and also appreciates making pottery or something of that nature. But I think that's a piece of the financials, is having that consistent rent from the brewery but still getting that $50 for every hour that you come in and do yoga, or those smaller money pieces with the still bigger, more staple, consistent rentals.
And it's so close to the river. Like, if we did like the whole Union Station, just begging for something to be done with it, right? How cool would that be to have in the summertime have yoga out by the river, right?
Yeah, I know with a space like this down in Arizona, in Gilbert, which is a suburb of Phoenix, they set up leases. So like they have 3 different maker spaces within their spot, but as a brewery you signed a 2-year lease for that space. So they had the money up front, and those businesses were able to be a part of that building while they were building it and make it to what they wanted. And the deal is after your 2-year lease, if you were moving out, the next person coming in, they would make it to what it needed to be for you.
Interesting.
So with the idea that maybe you are going to grow out of this space, or maybe it is just going to be a 2-year thing and it's not the most functional for you. I know a graphic design and digital print store that was in there, they moved out after their lease was done because, well, then COVID happened and their storefront really wasn't necessary. They were doing so much more online that it just didn't quite make sense. So I see that fluidity here. I think that would do well. And like we've all mentioned, different examples, like there are people doing it. It is totally possible. Without all the financial burden going on one big piece. And while still making it affordable for the people that don't have that steady income or maybe are still in that exploratory phase.
Right.
But gives them a chance to see it from the real side without losing everything. So, yeah.
Tiffany, is there any unique funding opportunities for artisan centers, coffee shops, female-owned businesses?
I don't know if there's really funding, that's specifically dedicated to that industry. Not to say that I can't come out, in the native area, I think yes, there is some focus on that. But, business model is a business model, so it doesn't, you can qualify under all kinds of different programs. I think these shouldn't, it's not, what you're talking about is kind of anchor tenant, and that is a very, from a financial standpoint, is a very important part, to know that there's a lot of rotation and vacancies in some of the smaller spots, and you still cash flow, because you have one or two new tenants, and that's a good feature.
Something you might consider is a type of anchor tenant or business that provides work to some of the makers. A company that I've seen that kind of provides that hybrid model is called Gum Road.
Okay.
They are a website to make it easy to sell digital products, and I think they're just now branching out into physical products. But what they do is hire on programmers on a consultant basis, and that sort of provides, the income for them, so they can, not leave the big paycheck, but they hire them on as consultants, so they have all their free time to build their own things, and that's a model that I've seen kind of growing. So maybe it's a design studio, maybe it's some sort of boutique artisan shop that you're coordinating business for these people, but it's sort of combining the actual business itself with the people that you're trying to support and either providing them business or some bigger business that they're all working on, but then also doing their own thing.
Absolutely. I guess that ties into with the idea of when I think of myself working at Cambria, for instance, we were all in college. And if you were able to be working and being there, but also being surrounding yourself with other people that could maybe help with that dream that you have, and start getting your feet on the ground, or kind of, yes, slinging coffee, but also, okay, you're a business major or you're a designer. Great. Your connection is actually right next to you instead of here's this email or they live halfway across the country, or I think that's a part of keeping it local as well and keeping that talent here. And throughout, that age inclusivity of maybe your dream that you've been, I think of my mother-in-law at 46, finally did something for herself that she wanted to do. She got the coffee shop that she's always wanted. And I know for myself going into college and being like, okay, my goal is to own a coffee shop by the time I'm 30. That's my goal. And then being done with college and you have your college debt and now you're getting married and you have this house and all these things, and it's like that.
Life happens.
Yeah. It's like there's no, how are you gonna own a coffee shop? That's far-fetched. Like, if
It's daunting, but to put it into reality, right? Like it looks like, it's a major thing, but if you can chunk it up,
and
It's
have
doable.
influential people that have done it and can share their knowledge and wisdom with you, so you can make the decision before it's too late, or start, not that it's ever too late, but before you're too deep.
right?
Or so be it, that you can start making changes now. Okay, if this is really what you want to do, I mean, that was big in our decision to move to Burdett. It was, okay, well, you said you wanted to own a coffee shop. That's been the one thing that you've wanted to do. And with all these other creative things, it's been hard to stay on course. But this was the opportunity to say, okay, we can wipe away our debts, we can live very affordably, and sometimes without a toilet for 4 months, but you'll be in the clear. And with this, like, I am able to run a business right now. Like, yes, it's not to the scale of Bemidji, and it's not the same demographic, and we're doing much more food than we are coffee, but I'm getting the experience of running a coffee shop. And that is what's worth it to me. So,
Well, and being realistic, and this is gonna sound really funny, Tiffany, but like, I owned a business, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, is there anything like business therapy or counseling? Because the reality of it is, you have to realize, oh, we should have some,
It's like co-therapy.
we should have some beer then.
Yeah.
Should we not? You know, the reality is that the first 3 years are the hardest,
Mhm.
and it's easy to be like, I don't want to deal with this anymore, right? Until, right, I'm not, you know, making it big means something different for everyone, right? But just that you gotta, you know, keep your spirits up, it's gonna happen, kind of a thing, right? But yeah, there's that piece of it too, because I see a very excited person, and this is an awesome idea, and I think we all agree that it's awesome, and especially good for Bemidji, because I gotta tell you, I'd rather buy art from local artisans than go to Hobby Lobby. I mean, no offense to Hobby Lobby, because when I need craft glue, they're there, but,
yes.
you know what I mean? Like, this is it's an enrichment of our community. But going down that journey and that path is not going to be, as you know, you've owned your own coffee, food place. The reality of that is, it takes a while for it to be sustainable. So, how do we keep, that piece of it? How do we keep the eyes on the prize and not get discouraged too?
Absolutely.
And be open to it evolving, right? I mean, we've all had some great ideas. I love the whole bridal piece, right? And I envision this cool pagoda, right? Where people are saying their vows or whatever. But, it will take a while for it to turn a profit.
Yes.
And maybe it won't. Maybe we'll have our business plan so great that people will be like, yes! For 6 months, we broke even, right? But
Maddie, you worked at Canterbury many years. You're
4
still-
years,
Still
yeah.
kind of connected with them, and I don't know them at all, but is that ever a possibility downstream?
Given the current price, no. If the price were to drop, yes.
Okay.
The price is a little inflated at the moment.
I didn't know it was for
tell me
sale.
about it.
It's
Trying
not
to
for
build a
sale.
house. Everything's inflated right now.
Well, it
It's for
includes
sale,
the
but
real
not for
estate.
sale.
Yeah.
For the right price, it would be for sale, but the right price
Yes.
is awfully high.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a whole from a coffee shop point of view, there's a whole other dynamic with the drive-through versus not having a drive-through
Right.
and that kind of thing. We're running into that right now with Caribou opened up in Burdett 6 months after we opened up, knowing that we were there. So that was kind of a slap in the face. But they have a drive-through, and we haven't gone through a winter with the drive-through yet. So far, again, we do so much more business with food than coffee. I mean, we still make coffee drinks all day, but majority of our profits are food. And the property behind us went for sale to the gentleman that owned it. We had said from the very beginning, if you're interested in ever selling it, please let us know. If you could, let us be the first.
Make an offer.
We would really appreciate it. And that opportunity presented itself and we were able to purchase it. Because it is directly behind our business, and that's the only place we could put a drive-through if we decided to put a drive-through in. So then there's the argument of, well, do you want to be a drive-through coffee shop? Because it brings off an entirely different environment. Right now, you come in, you chat. The other day I talked to a guy for an hour. Granted, we were open, we unofficially open at 8 a.m. because you can't upset the locals by changing your hours. Our posted hours are 9 a.m. But he came in at 8 and I had everything done. And we talked for an entire hour. And I wouldn't have been able to do that with a busy drive-through. And so then it's the balance of, do I enjoy this conversation with this 70-year-old gentleman from Forks, Washington that's fishing and just told me his whole life story and we had this great conversation back and forth, or do I want to answer 4, 5, 12 calls in the drive-through for the 5 seconds that I interact with them?
But as a business owner,
That
that
owner,
can fuel revenue
Yep.
for those more intimate encounters
Mhm.
that you've experienced.
yes,
So, and if that's where they want to be, if they want to zip through the drive-through and not have conversations, well then,
yeah.
then I would rather spend my time on this beautiful gentleman, right?
Mhm.
Who's, hey, retired, coming to Bemidji, Minnesota, of all places, right? Or Baudette, right?
Mhm.
There is that, sustainable revenue
Mhm.
to be able to buy the building behind.
Yep. Yeah. It's all very interesting balance.
Yeah, and there's a give and take. You will have to let go of.
yeah. Yeah. Yep. And then with the drive-through comes the cost of another employee. Like I'm able to be there by myself until 9. If we had the drive-through, I would not be able to be there by myself until 9. Because you wouldn't make the guy happy that came from Forks. Maybe you talk to him for 10 minutes versus an hour, but then I'm upsetting my drive-through people by waiting for 10 minutes for their coffee because there's only one of me and I'm supposed to be in 3 different places at once, making food, making coffee, and taking their orders. So,
There's that growth piece.
Yeah.
How I grow it.
yeah.
Yeah, you might look at it as you get to hire somebody and have another
Yes.
person there so that you can be more free to have those types of conversations.
And I love that.
And you're awfully young, but at some point, you might move into, well, I'm gonna own this, I'm gonna let others run it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you can have more of those
Mm-hmm.
meaningful experiences.
Yes. And then there's the model of, now I'm kind of rambling on, but like right now, my mother-in-law is in a partnership. So there's 2 people that own the coffee shop. Whereas for me, in my point of life, I would prefer to not have a partnership and rather have a very seasoned manager. And it also gives the demographic, like, is there another person that wants to be in Baudette and own a business financially, versus like having that flexibility of just being the manager. So that's very interesting.
You could always buy out your mother-in-law and make her the season manager.
Yeah, I hate to
Yeah.
do this, but
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
playing hooky from work, so I gotta go.
Yes.
Is there a way
It's
for
almost
us to
9:30.
keep, all of us to keep in contact
Yes,
with you so we can?
please.
Okay.
I realized I checked my purse before I got here and I don't have any business cards with me. It's such a rookie mistake.
That's okay.
I can
Do
send
you
out
have
an
it
email.
in a
Yeah.
slide that I can take a picture of?
I don't know. Paul, if
I'll
you
send
could-
some emails
okay.
out.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Yes.
And is there anything we can do specifically to keep this dream alive, to come back to Bemidji?
In my eyes,
Yeah, what are the
it's
next
finding people that are interested in having a space like this, whether it's a crafter or a hairstylist that is doing, well, legally you can't do hair out of your house, but maybe they're licensed and they're doing hair over the weekends and they're having to go to other people's homes to do it, or maybe there is a little print shop that's doing hand pressing or whatever it might be. But finding those people that would fill that building, that would be huge.
Yeah, cause that would go a long way to your business.
To
case
say,
for
here
the bank.
are my
I've got people lined up.
tenants.
But I'm thinking of the maker space, if it does come to fruition, depending on where it's at, what facility it is in, and how multi-purpose that facility might be able to be packaged around.
Mhm.
Who knows?
And it's a little late, but do we have another thing like Art in the Park coming up where you could go and chat up the artists, get some business cards?
Is there a fall?
The studio cruise, I don't know if they're doing the studio cruise this year, normally they do that in mid-October. But I don't know if they're doing that.
Cause
this
that
year.
would be another way, A, you could figure out what the interest in that would be, and B, you could then start to stack your deck of, these would be the artists that I would like to have come in.
I know David Talloway arranged the studio cruise in the past, and so he'd have all the contact information of probably most anybody in a 25-mile radius of Bemidji.
And the same with the Black Duck Wood Carvers Festival. too.
Yeah, that's a
There's
good point.
many vendors there that.
And then Maddie, we have a lot of snowbirders, so I know Jamie's leaving, thank you, for Arizona.